vast markets to advance China's own industrial capacity. China's game is not to let Tesla win. That's according to Bill Russo, who's the founder of Automobility. That's a Shanghai-based consulting firm. Mr. Russo says China's game is to make the domestic industry compete. Sounds odd, but really it doesn't. Now, from the outset, officials in Beijing made it clear they wanted something in return for throwing open the country to Tesla, because Tesla is the only company that I know of, certainly the only big company, that's not state-owned, or at least partially state-owned. Ford, GM, BMW, they're all partially state-owned, not Tesla. Now, Chinese leaders had grown frustrated with their domestic electric vehicle companies, their performance, and they saw Tesla as an opportunity to reset the country's auto industry. Tesla would be expected to localize its supply chain and groom Chinese manufacturers, steps that could accelerate the domestic industry. And it worked. Now, Miao Wei, who negotiated the deal with Mr. Musk openly, a Chinese official, openly discussed how Tesla could propel underachieving local EV startups. Now, he likened it to lobbing a predatory catfish into a pond of sluggish fish. Now, Tesla has proved to be an effective predatory catfish. Its Chinese-made cars restored confidence of the Chinese investors in electric-made vehicles as a whole, helping supercharge domestic startups that had struggled. Pre-Tesla, nobody believed that a Chinese brand could be riveting. That's according to Michael Dunn, who's the chief executive of ZozoGo and a former GM official. ZozoGo expects overall sales in China of new energy vehicles, that's both electric and plug-in hybrids, to be roughly 3.1 million this year. That's more than double last year. Now, Tesla's effect has also lifted the supply chain, meeting a goal of Chinese leaders. Tesla has sent engineers to train workers to help with design and research, and in part, know-how to firms ranging from battery makers to die-cast producers. In early 2021, Tesla said it had reached a domestic supply sourcing ratio of over 90% in its Shanghai factory. Tom Zhu, a top China executive, has said that Tesla is on track to source all of its vehicle components locally by year end. That, my friends, is huge, because they didn't used to do that. They used to import so much to China to put into the cars. By the end of the year, they expect to be sourcing 100% from China. That's a supply chain issue. There were previously tons of parts that were made in other countries. Now we're going to make them all in China. Tesla engineers also work with a Chinese battery maker, Contemporary Amperex Technology, to tailor products to Tesla's needs. In a 2020 supply deal with Tesla affirmed the company's place as now being a top-tier battery manufacturer. You can do that when you have customers. Now, a supplier of housing components and hydraulic system relies on Tesla for roughly like half of its business. Rival electric companies in China are now taking aim at Tesla. And they don't like it, okay? Because now, Tesla has improved the supply chain, but now these Chinese startup companies are saying, look, they're getting preferential treatment. And Beijing is beginning to restrict the use of Tesla cars on military bases and other sensitive government premises. Bottom line is, here's what Tesla did. They went into China. They got access to the market. They got cheap land, tax breaks, and they got to keep all ownership of the company. But in return, they sourced all their parts from China. Now, maybe 2 years ago, I did a podcast on Apple, on iPhones. And I mentioned that the cost of an iPhone's like $1,000. And the cost to assemble an iPhone is really about 8% of the cost of the phone. So in theory, you could manufacture that phone in the United States. Okay? And really, instead of $1,000, it might cost you $1,050. So it wouldn't be that much more expensive. Here's the problem. You can't buy the parts here. There's no supply chain in this country. The supply chain only exists in China. So while you can manufacture an iPhone for about the same price here as in China, if you had the parts, you can't because you don't have the parts. There's nobody that makes this here. There's nobody that supplies this here. You'd have to import it all from China, which would have it be stuck in the ports, and you don't have your supply chain, and therein lies the rub. Okay? That's the big deal. China now has the supply chain in their country that now let them manufacture electric vehicles in that country without importing anything. Now, how does that affect the supply chain for you and I? Well, what it does is Tesla makes more than half of their cars in China, and they make them for a whole lot less money. And it's not so much because the labor's cheaper, although it is. And the quality is not as good. I don't think it is because there's complaints about quality of the Chinese cars. There's not complaints about quality of the American cars. But like anything else in China, they'll improve on that. But they have the supply chain there. That's the problem. That's the reason that Musk got in bed with China, because Musk got something out of it and China got something out of it. China now has a thriving electric car business in their country, their manufacturers, because they have a supply chain in place. They can have all the parts available to build electric cars. They don't have to worry about tariffs. They don't have to worry about embargoes. They don't have to worry about shipping. They don't have to worry about tariffs. Just make it all here in China. And what did Elon Musk get out of it? He's now the richest man in the world. It's funny. The biggest communist country and the richest man in the world get along swimmingly. I guess that's compromise, isn't it? But that's the whole thing with the supply chain problem, folks. The supply chain problem is if you're patient in the form of a shot, you can get what you want. If you got to have it all now, it's not going to happen. And if you want to go ahead and have something that's complex and do something that's complex, make sure that it's locally sourced. But nothing's really changed. What's mainly changed is our perception. What's mainly changed is what we will compromise, what we will tolerate, what we'll put up with, okay? I hope that helps with the supply chain problem. I found it very interesting. I thought you would too. Part 2, let's talk about the Matt Walsh lecture at SLU. As I mentioned before, I posted on my Facebook page I was going to see Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is he's a blogger, he's a podcaster, he's a speaker, he's an author for the Daily Wire. That's Ben Shapiro's company. It's a conservative group. I like the Daily Wire. I like Ben Shapiro. Like anything else, I don't agree with everything that Ben Shapiro has to say, but I don't agree with everything I have to say sometimes. But Ben Shapiro is a smart guy. He's entertaining. He's a thinker. He's a smart guy. I like him. So I thought, okay, this is Matt Walsh. I'll go ahead and listen to him because my number 3 son invited me. I thought I would go. SLU, St. Louis University, invited Matt Walsh to speak on campus. It was a Young Republicans organization that sponsored him. And then there were protests from those on the left. They didn't want Matt Walsh speaking at their university because the real reason, or the perceived reason, is because he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's a homophobe, he's a hate speaker. The real reason, it's because he didn't agree with what they thought. Okay, their thoughts were different than his thoughts. And that's the big problem with the left, is that they have absolutely, positively no tolerance for anyone who is not in full lockstep with them. So I thought I would go, I'd report on it. And there were protesters there. And they were Black Lives Matter protesting. And the reason I say because they had signs saying Black Lives Matter, and they all identified as Black Lives Matter protesters. Here's the very funny thing about that. I didn't see any black people protesting. None. Zero. Now, I'm not saying I didn't see them there. It was dark. I wasn't that close to them. I saw nothing but white faces, but I didn't see the faces of all the people. So could there have been some black protesters there? Sure. Did I see them? Nope. I didn't. The protesters were saying, no KKK, Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter, Gay Lives Matter. Okay, so I'm thinking, wow, okay, is this Matt Walsh anti-black, anti-gay, anti-trans? We'll find out in the speech, okay? Also, as standing in line to get into the building, I don't know if they were protesters or people who lived on the upper floor of the building, poured something on us. I'd like to think it was water. I hope it was water. But they didn't want us standing in line. The building they had moved them from, because originally this was to be held at St. Louis University. And at the last minute, they pulled the plug on them. They said, look, we're not going to let you on this campus. So they had to scramble, and they had the speech in the Coronado Hall, which was just off campus. But in the Coronado Hall, upstairs from the Coronado Hall, there are apartments. These people were pouring some liquid onto us standing in line. It was bizarre. It was horrible. So as the protesters are yelling, Black Lives Matter, no KK, Trans Lives Matter, Gay Lives Matter, no KKK, which I'm thinking, what's this guy all about? I'm going to find out. And so, of course, the people in line start saying, let's go Brandon, which is the dopey mantra of some on the right. The news said they blocked the street, the protesters, that is. I didn't see that, but again, I wasn't there the whole time, and I wasn't real close to the action. But the protesters, for the most part, were just a bunch of loudmouths who were annoying, but I didn't see them breaking the law, except for when they poured stuff on me and others. Didn't care for that at all. That was breaking the law. We told security about it. They really didn't do a whole lot. Don't know what they could have done. Now, the lecture itself, this Matt Walsh, okay, he's like a whole lot of speakers, a lot of self-deprecating humor. He's a Catholic man who booked his lecture at a Catholic university, but then was banned by the Catholic university because, as Father White said, his views they're not in lockstep with the Catholic faith. They're contrary to the Catholic faith. Now, I don't know that that's true or not. It certainly was not true with anything that I heard in the lecture. Basically, statements made by Matt Walsh were, babies are people. Life begins at conception, which is a standard mantra of anybody that's pro-life, a standard mantra of the Catholic Church. He also said, women don't have penises. Okay. Now, I know that makes a lot of people upset. Well, some women do. He said only women can have babies. Others will say, well, no, not just women. Anybody can have a baby. And that's just not true. Women don't have penises. Men do. Men cannot have babies. Only women can. Now, forget the whole trans and identifying as. I'm not a person who says, if you're a trans person and you want to be called she instead of he or he instead of she, that's what I'm going to call you. I'll be respectful and call you whatever you want. But that's different from saying, I am a woman or I am a man. Actually, you're not. I'll call you by the pronoun you want to be called by, but you're not. If you're a 17-year-old boy who now identifies as a girl and you want to be on the wrestling team, my daughter's not going to wrestle against you because you'll crush her. Okay? It's ridiculous. But that's some of the stuff that he was saying. Again, Father White from SLU said they banned him because his views were not consistent with those of the Catholic Church. He never specified what those views were. Another thing